He came to investigate the disappearance of two people, but ended up in a city where laws are just an illusion and the present ended long ago. Welcome to the year 4028, where humanity no longer rules the earth. Secret Service agent Ethan Burke and his partner travel to Idaho to investigate the disappearance of two federal agents. Ethan is especially concerned because one of them is his former partner and former lover, Kate Hewson. On the way, their car crashes head-on with a truck in a violent accident. Sometime later, Ethan wakes up by a river deep in the woods, with no memory of how he got there. Struggling to his feet, he makes his way to the nearest town, Wayward Pines, the very place where the agents went missing. He asks to use a phone but collapses from exhaustion. When he wakes up again, Ethan finds himself in a hospital bed being tended to by a friendly nurse named Pam. She claims to know nothing about his partner's whereabouts and assumes he's dead. She can't explain where Ethan's wallet, phone, or personal belongings are, but suggests he ask the town sheriff. After spending a full day in the hospital without seeing a doctor, Ethan starts to suspect something is off. Determined to get answers, he puts on his bloodstained suit and heads to the nearest diner to get food and call his wife. At the diner, he meets Beverly, a kind and sympathetic waitress who listens to his strange story. She gives him a burger and quietly slips him a card with her home address and a cryptic note: "There are no crickets in Wayward Pines." This strikes Ethan as odd, since he clearly heard insects in the bushes earlier. Curious, he checks the bushes and discovers a small speaker playing the sound of crickets. The next morning, Ethan is kicked out of his hotel for not being able to pay. With nowhere else to go, he decides to visit Beverly's address. But when he arrives, he finds a decaying cabin instead of a home, and inside, the tortured and murdered body of one of the missing agents. Horrified, Ethan rushes to the sheriff's office to report it, but Sheriff Arnold Pope reacts with disturbing calmness, as if he doesn't believe a word. Ethan tries to call home but can't get through. Meanwhile, his wife Teresa and their son learn about the crash. She tries to reach him, but he has no phone. The agency recovers the wrecked vehicle and tests for biological evidence, expecting to confirm the agents' deaths. Oddly, they find no trace of Ethan's DNA in the car. Everyone begins to assume Ethan faked his death and ran off with his mistress. Back in Wayward Pines, Ethan returns to the bar to find Beverly, but the bartender insists no one by that name ever worked there. When Ethan pushes, the bartender knocks him out cold. Ethan wakes up in the hospital again, this time cuffed to the bed. Dr. Jenkins, the hospital director, insists Ethan needs surgery. Nurse Pam sedates him before he can object. As he's being prepped for surgery, Beverly unexpectedly shows up and helps him escape. With a clever distraction, Ethan manages to knock Pam out, and he and Beverly flee and hide before the sedative fully kicks in. She saved his life, but the mystery deepens when she tells Ethan the year is 2000. He's baffled, knowing it's clearly 2014 outside. The next morning, Ethan changes clothes to blend in and avoid being recognized. At the park, he spots Kate. Shocked to see her so soon, he recalls how she helped him through a traumatic time, after he failed to stop a terrorist attack that killed 621 people. He follows her and learns she's now married to a man named Harold Ballinger. She warns him that they're being watched and their conversation is likely bugged, so she avoids answering most of his questions. What stuns Ethan most is her claim that it's been 12 years since they last saw each other, not 5 weeks. Convinced something deeply wrong is happening in Wayward Pines, Ethan steals a car and tries to escape, but every attempt to leave ends in failure. He eventually finds himself at a massive electrified fence surrounding the town. When he returns to his car, he runs into Sheriff Pope, who confirms what Ethan feared: there's no way out of Wayward Pines. Meanwhile, it becomes clear that Ethan's boss and Dr. Jenkins are working together, and everything happening to Ethan isn't a coincidence. It's all part of their plan. During a tense conversation with the sheriff, Ethan realizes that any hopes for cooperation are off the table. The sheriff is ready to name him the main suspect behind everything strange happening in town and orders him back to the motel. The next morning, Ethan decides he can't accept the way things are and is determined to uncover the truth about what's really going on. With no working computers and no newspapers in sight, he returns to the abandoned house where he found the dead agent. In the agent's boot, he discovers a notebook but doesn't manage to grab it, once again interrupted by the sheriff. Later, back at the bar with Beverly, Ethan demands answers. Beverly, afraid to speak too loudly due to the cameras and microphones everywhere, admits that she and the dead agent had planned to escape, but the plan failed. The notebook hidden in the boot contains a map that could lead them out of town. After learning that Kate works at a toy store, Ethan pays her a visit and asks why she refuses to talk about her past life. She points to a sign listing the town's rules: no talking about your past life, no trying to escape, always answer the phone when it rings. Ethan is increasingly disturbed. The town uses fake money, and the residents seem gripped by fear. Soon after, Ethan meets a woman claiming to be the wife of the dead agent, despite the fact that Ethan knows the man was never married. Even stranger, she insists her husband died by suicide, though the body clearly suggests otherwise. Back at the police station, Ethan is told the body has been sent to the morgue and that he'll be jailed if he keeps breaking the sheriff's rules. Undeterred, Ethan sneaks into the hospital to recover the notebook with the escape map. On his way out, he spots two orderlies wheeling his wife and son through the hospital. He tries to follow but is intercepted by Dr. Jenkins, who denies any new patients have arrived. Meanwhile, we learn that Teresa and Ben were indeed headed to Wayward Pines in search of Ethan. When Ethan meets with Beverly again, she tells him there's a tracking chip in his leg that the town uses to monitor his movements. She helps him remove it but warns him to keep it in his pocket and only toss it when he's ready to flee. Ethan is still unsettled by the fact that Beverly doesn't remember anything after the year 2000, but they're now united by a shared goal, escaping this eerie place. Even the cemetery is strange, with no names or death dates on the gravestones. As they pass surveillance cameras, Ethan notices that they only react to the chip. Without it, the cameras don't register him. That's when he runs into Kate and her husband, who invite him and Beverly to dinner. The next morning, Ethan leaves the chip in his motel room and heads into the woods to study the map. He finds a backpack with supplies for the escape. Back in town, he tells Beverly that tonight's the night, they're going to make a run for it. To avoid suspicion, they agree to attend dinner at Kate and Harold's house and leave their chips behind there. Nervous and distracted, Beverly accidentally brings up a memory from her past life, mentioning her daughter. Realizing she may have been caught, she runs. Ethan chases after her and learns the sheriff publicly executed the dead agent. Suddenly, phones across town start ringing. The townspeople, acting on cue, begin hunting down Ethan and Beverly. The two split up to escape, but Beverly is caught. Ethan fights off his pursuers and watches from a window as a crowd gathers in the town square for Beverly's public execution, punishment for trying to escape. It's revealed that Kate and Harold betrayed them to the sheriff and Dr. Jenkins, who staged the gruesome demonstration to send a message. Realizing that the people of Wayward Pines are acting like crazed cult members, Ethan tries to escape, but the search party keeps chasing him. While the sheriff reminds the townsfolk of the rules, Ethan understands there's no way out and has to go back. That night, he sneaks into Kate's house to try talking to his ex. She admits she wasn't the one who reported his escape. The sheriff did it on purpose to make an example out of them. She's scared and has wanted to run away for a long time. Even tried before, but failed. The only way to survive here is to obey the town's rules, but Ethan isn't willing to compromise his principles and is ready to fight to the end. The next morning, he finds Beverly's body in an old house and says a quiet goodbye, feeling guilty for not being able to save her. Meanwhile, Teresa and Ben keep searching for Ethan, thinking he ran off to see his lover. Teresa doesn't want to believe it and contacts a secret agency in Idaho to check if her husband was in their state. Using his online account, she gets information from the agency and finds a gas station where he was seen a few days ago. There, some kids report that two agents were in a terrible car accident near a town called Wayward Pines. Realizing it must be her husband, Teresa and her son head there. On the way, they're stopped by the same sheriff, who purposely damages their fuel line and then causes a crash. Ethan sneaks into Beverly's empty, sterile house but is noticed by the realtor, who warns him to leave and not report him to the sheriff. Tracking a food delivery truck, Ethan sneaks inside and hides, hoping to get out of town, but it's no use. The van stops at a strange building that looks like a huge warehouse. Inside, Ethan finds his wife's car and realizes Teresa and Ben have arrived in Wayward Pines but got into a crash. Moments later, the sheriff attacks Ethan, beating him and knocking him out with a sedative. Waking up in a hospital, Ethan learns that his family was there but released. Pam mocks him, hinting that now Ethan, Teresa, and their son are living in the house that belonged to the late Beverly. Back home, Ethan reunites with his family and is genuinely relieved they're safe. He warns them not to answer calls, avoid contact with others, and stay inside the house, convinced the outside world is dangerous. There, Ethan runs into the realtor again, who reminds him they're under constant surveillance. When Ethan faces the sheriff once more, he realizes the sheriff is just a pawn in the system. The real person to talk to is someone else. On his way home, Dr. Jenkins stops Ethan, urging him to comply with the system and the rules, but Ethan can't accept the cruelty and strangeness of the townspeople. Near the house, Ethan spots Kate and follows her into the woods, unaware their son saw them together. Kate has come to reveal the horrors happening in town and says she's decided to give up and stop fighting. Ethan is disappointed but believes she can remember her past and fight for freedom again. When Teresa and Ben hear from their son that Ethan's lover lives in town, they decide to leave. Teresa leaves her wedding ring behind and tries to escape with Ben, but the sheriff starts hunting them down and catches them near the border. He beats Ben and threatens to kill Teresa. Ethan finds them and attacks the sheriff. After beating the lawman, Ethan kills him and uses his key fob to open the gates. It looks like the family might get away, but suddenly, a monster from beyond the perimeter grabs the sheriff's body and drags it into the darkness. Realizing it's not safe outside the fence, Ethan quickly closes the gates. Soon, the family returns home and is greeted by a courier who delivers Ben's school uniform. Ethan realizes that whatever was outside the gates wasn't just some wild animals. It was something far worse, but he needs time to figure everything out. He tells his wife that this town runs by strict rules and is loaded with surveillance, so their only option is to play along for now until they can find a way out. The next morning, Ethan breaks into the police station to steal some weapons, but he's met there by the town's mayor, Mr. Fisher, and others. It turns out that after Arnold Pope was killed, Ethan took over as sheriff and is now responsible for maintaining order. In the basement, Ethan finds a secret safe containing personal files on everyone living in town. It turns out that most people ended up here either by accident or by force, and their pasts have been deliberately erased or altered. They now have new jobs, families, and hobbies, but they're all required to forget their old lives. If anyone remembers their past, they face what's called retribution, a public execution. Soon after, a group of volunteers brings in a limping realtor. He had written the phrase, "In times of universal deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act." The townspeople believe this act deserves execution, with Pam, a self-proclaimed longtime resident, pushing hardest for it. Ethan promises to look into it but is strongly against the execution. Meanwhile, Ben heads to school and meets his new homeroom teacher, Megan Fisher, the mayor's wife. She asks him strange questions and gets annoyed when he seems stuck in his old life. Teresa spots Kate working at a toy store and decides to talk to her about Ethan. Kate, Ethan's ex, tries to explain that things have changed and she's no threat to their family, but Teresa remains suspicious. After class, Ben meets Amy, a sweet girl who seems interested in him. That evening, she invites him on a date to the park, where they talk about the town's boundaries and what lies beyond them. Pam calls Ethan to remind him the realtor's execution is scheduled for the next evening. Peter shares his story of how he ended up in town. He was vacationing in another state with a woman when he drank too much and woke up beside Pam. Pam, who works as a nurse, rules the town with an iron fist like a gray cardinal. Peter remembers his past and family but has adapted to the town's rules. Still, his memories make him want to run and resist the system. He knows there's only one way out of this town: death. During another interrogation, Ben changes his answers and starts to let go of his past. In response, Mrs. Fisher gives him a guitar. That evening, the families of the mayor and the new sheriff meet at a restaurant. Mr. Fisher fears his wife, who's a skilled psychologist, and knows that children are the town's most valuable resource. Spotting Ethan at the table, Pam toasts to the new lawman and reminds him about Peter's execution. Ethan tries to protect the realtor and pulls him aside, but Peter no longer wants to live or run away. He's tired and ready to sacrifice himself so the sheriff can earn respect from the locals. Peter rushes toward the fence and dies from an electric shock. Meanwhile, Teresa gets a job offer. The realtor's position has just opened up. Late at night, Ethan promises he'll get to the bottom of everything and sets out on a hike into the mountains. Meanwhile, Ben and Teresa argue because their son has really taken to this place. He's fallen for Emmy and finally made some friends. Realizing their son doesn't need to be controlled all the time, Teresa agrees to take a job as a realtor. According to the rules, she has to meet the town's newest resident at the hospital and hand over a house that belonged to the previous owners. Trying to learn more, Teresa discovers that this man remembers not only the car accident but also what happened afterward. Finding a spot where they can talk without being watched, Teresa learns that the man was once inside some kind of capsule with a round glass window, and scientists were observing him. At the same time, Ben and a group of other kids go through an initiation process. Megan Fisher tells the students that they could be the first true generation of this town. Showing them various images, she explains about the creatures living outside the city's perimeter. The world is full of beings called Abbies, mutants caused by centuries of mutation. They were once human, but nature played a cruel trick on humanity, turning them into terrifying monsters. A man named David Pilcher foresaw the apocalypse and created this town like Noah building his Arkansas. This town is the last cradle of civilization, and the kids are responsible for ensuring humanity's survival. Ben is skeptical until he picks up a coin dated 2095 and realizes it's now the year 4028. On top of that, the adults aren't ready to know this dark truth, so the kids are forbidden from telling their parents. If they do, their parents might either take their own lives or the city's leadership will kill the kids to keep the secret. Meanwhile, Ethan climbs a cliff and is attacked by an unknown creature. After hunting, he finds the carcass of a wild animal and uses it as bait. Hiding nearby, Ethan comes face to face with an abbey and realizes these are the terrifying monsters that now roam the planet. Continuing to survive in these inhuman conditions, Ethan reaches the nearest town and sees it's completely destroyed. No humans have lived there for hundreds, maybe thousands, of years. Soon a helicopter arrives,